pain. It was the only thing she truly owned. Sharp teeth sank into the soft skin of her neck, tearing, taking, draining. Livia didn't scream, because she learned a long time ago that screaming only made the king bite harder. Instead, she stared at the cold, wet stone wall of her cell. She counted the cracks. 1, 2, 3. Drip. Her blood hit the floor. As the silence stretched, the feeding stopped. King Valerian pulled back, wiping his mouth with the back of a pale hand. He didn't look at her like a father looks at a daughter. He looked at her like a man looks at a finished meal. Empty. Useless. Weak, he spat. The word echoed off the dungeon walls. Deep down, she knew the truth. She was a mistake. A half-breed shame he kept hidden in the dark. Truth be told, she sometimes wished he would just finish the job and let her die. Without another word, he turned and left. The heavy iron door slammed shut, clang, locking her back into the blackness. Livia slid down the wall, her legs shaking because there was barely any blood left in her veins to keep her standing. She touched the wound on her neck. It burned. In the quiet that followed, she closed her eyes. She waited for the cold to take her. But then, a sound. Not the drip of water, not the squeak of a rat, a howl. It started low, a rumble in the earth, and then rose into a terrifying scream that shook the dust from the ceiling. Livia's eyes snapped open. Wolves! The enemy! Before she could move, the noise grew louder, closer. Screams, vampire screams, pierced the air. The smell of copper blood mixed with something else. Something wild. Wet fur, pine needles, rain. Her heart skipped. Were they here for her? Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just bad luck, but the sounds of slaughter stopped right outside her door. In the span of a breath, the heavy iron hinges groaned. Wood splintered. Crack! The door didn't just open. It exploded inward. Livia curled into a ball in the corner, pressing her face against her knees because she couldn't bear to see the monsters that had come to kill her. The air in the cell changed instantly. The stale rot was gone, replaced by a heat that felt like a summer storm. Heavy footsteps crunched on the stone floor. Thud, thud, thud. As if the world narrowed, the room went silent. She trembled, waiting for the claws, waiting for the teeth. "What is this?" A voice rumbled. It was deep, rough like gravel grinding together, and so loud it vibrated in her chest. Livia looked up. The moment their eyes locked, her breath caught. He was huge. He filled the doorway, blocking out the torchlight from the hall. He wasn't in wolf form, not fully, but he wasn't human either. His eyes were glowing gold, burning with a fire that terrified her. Blood, vampire blood, soaked his shirt. He stepped closer. With every step he took, the air got hotter. He wasn't going to kill her quickly. She could see it in the way his nostrils flared as he sniffed the air. He smelled the vampire on her. "Please." Her voice was just a broken whisper. He froze. His gaze dropped to the wound on her neck, still oozing red. His lip curled back, revealing sharp canines. She didn't know what scared her more, the anger on his face or the strange, pulling sensation in her gut when he looked at her. Without thinking, he dropped to his knees. The stone cracked under his weight. He didn't strike. He reached out, his hand large and calloused, and brushed the hair from her face. His skin was scorching hot against her freezing cheek. "You're dying," he said. It wasn't a question. As the truth unraveled, Livia nodded. She was cold. So cold. Suddenly, the giant wolf man did something crazy. He brought his own hand to his mouth and bit down, hard. Blood welled up in his palm. Crimson. Rich. It smelled nothing like the cold, dead blood of the coven. It smelled like life. "Drink," he commanded. She shook her head weakly because it was forbidden. Wolves and vampires didn't mix. It was the oldest law. "Drink," he growled, pressing his bleeding hand against her lips. Her body moved on instinct. The smell. It was intoxicating. It called to a hunger she didn't know she had. Her lips parted. The first drop hit her tongue. In a single heartbeat, the world shifted. It wasn't just blood. It was liquid fire. It raced down her throat, burning away the cold, burning away the weakness. As fire bloomed beneath her skin, her eyes widened. Thump, thump. Her heart kicked against her ribs. Harder, faster. Thump, thump. As the bond pulsed, she grabbed his wrist, drinking deeply now, desperate for more. She couldn't stop because the emptiness inside her was finally being filled. Shadows danced between them, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid of the dark. She looked up at him, gasping for air. His golden eyes were wide, shocked, staring at her as if he was seeing a ghost. Between one breath and the next, something snapped into place. An invisible thread, tying her soul to his. Her chest ached with a sudden, overwhelming feeling of safety. More importantly, she felt power, not the cold, creeping magic of her father, but something wild, something that wanted to run. The wolfman pulled his hand back, clutching it to his chest. He looked at the wound, then at her. He whispered a single word, a word that hung heavy in the damp air. "Mate?" Time stood still. Livia didn't know what that meant. She didn't know who he was. But as consciousness began to fade, dragging her into a deep, healing sleep, she knew one thing. The girl who died in this cell was gone. And she let it happen, falling forward into the arms of the enemy, unaware that his blood hadn't just saved her. It had made her something else entirely, something dangerous. So, the nightmare ended. Or maybe it had just begun. Light. It was everywhere. Livia gasped, throwing her hands up to cover her face because the sun was supposed to be death. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the sizzle of burning skin, waiting for the agony that always came when a vampire touched the day. 1 second passed, then 2. Instead, there was only warmth. It felt like a soft blanket wrapped around her bones. Slowly, terrifyingly, she lowered her hands. The golden light streamed through a rough-hewn window, dancing on the dust motes in the air. It touched her pale arm. It didn't burn. It kissed. Her thoughts spun. She was a creature of the night. A monster. Monsters didn't get to sit in the sun. Deep down, she knew the truth. Something inside her had broken. Or maybe it had been fixed. She sat up. The room was rustic, smelling of cedarwood and dried sage. She was lying on a bed of thick furs. Soft. Luxurious. So different from the cold stone floor she had slept on for 20 years. Suddenly, her stomach gave a violent lurch. Gah! It wasn't a polite rumble. It was a growl, a predator's demand. Before she could move, the door creaked open. An older woman walked in, carrying a wooden tray. She wore simple clothes, but her eyes were sharp. Amber. Watchful. A wolf. The woman set the tray down on a small table. "Eat," she said. Her voice was gruff, not unkind, but wary. Livia stared at the food. Roasted meat. Venison. Steam curled off it, carrying a scent that hit Livia like a physical blow. As if pulled by a string, she leaned forward. Usually, human food tasted like ash to her. Vampires drank blood. That was the rule. That was the law. Despite that, the smell of the meat flooded her senses, and her mouth watered. Saliva pooled under her tongue. She didn't reach for the fork. Her wolf stirred. She grabbed the meat with her bare hands. She tore into it. The flavor exploded on her tongue, rich, savory, bloody. She ate because a new, terrifying hunger was clawing at her insides. She ate because the beast waking up in her chest screamed for fuel. She devoured it all, every bite. She licked the grease from her fingers, panting slightly. In the quiet that followed, shame washed over her. She looked up. The older woman was staring at her with wide eyes. Wolves ate heartily, yes, but not like that. Not like a starving animal. Without warning, the air in the room grew heavy, thick, electrified. The hairs on Livia's arms stood up. She knew who it was before she even saw him. The scent hit her first. Rain, musk, and that strange, spicy heat that made her blood sing. Jackson. He filled the doorway again. He had washed the blood off, but the danger still clung to him like a second skin. He wore leather breeches and a loose shirt that did nothing to hide the massive width of his shoulders. The moment their eyes locked, the world tilted. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Thump, 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 thump. It was so loud she was sure he could hear it. He stepped into the room. The older woman bowed her head quickly and slipped out, leaving them alone. As the silence stretched, Livia pulled the furs up to her chin. She felt naked under his gaze, even though she was fully dressed. He looked at her not with hatred, but with a deep, confusing intensity. His golden eyes tracked the movement of her throat as she swallowed. "You healed fast," he said. His voice was a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. Truth be told, she felt stronger than she ever had in her life. "Who are you?" he asked. He took a step closer. "My pack. They smell something on you, something wrong." Livia's blood went cold. If he knew she was the Vampire King's daughter, he would kill her. He had to. The war between their species was older than the trees outside. Because of that, she had to lie. "Livia," she whispered. "My name is Livia." "Livia," he repeated. The name sounded different on his tongue, possessive, heavy. "I was a prisoner," she lied, her voice trembling. "The vampires, they kept me for blood." It wasn't a total lie. She was a prisoner. She was bled. But she left out the part about her father. She left out the part about the fangs she was desperately trying to keep retracted. Jackson studied her. He leaned in, bracing his hands on the bed frame, trapping her. He brought his face close to hers. So close she could see the flecks of brown in his gold irises. So close she could feel the heat radiating off him. He inhaled deeply, smelling her neck. Her breath caught. A jolt of electricity shot down her spine, settling low in her belly. She wanted to pull away. She wanted to lean in. "You don't smell like a human anymore, Livia," he murmured. Time stood still. He knew. He had to know. Yet he didn't pull out a weapon. He didn't call the guards. "You smell like me," he whispered. As the bond pulsed, Livia realized what he meant. The blood oath. His blood was in her veins now. It was masking her scent, hiding the vampire rot under the smell of the alpha. He reached out, his rough thumb tracing the line of her jaw. His touch was gentle, too gentle for a killer. "You are safe here," he vowed, his eyes burning into hers. "No one touches what is mine." And she let it happen, leaning into his touch because she was weak, and he was the only fire in her cold world. Even so, a thought chilled her to the bone. He was promising to protect a victim. If he ever found out she was the enemy, that promise would turn into a death sentence. So, She closed her eyes and let him believe the lie. She was safe for now. But outside, the forest was waking up, and inside her, a war had just begun. The world was too loud. That was the first thing Livia realized when she stepped out of the Alpha's lodge. By the time her boots hit the dirt path, a wall of noise slammed into her. The laughter of children sounded like screaming. The wind in the trees roared like a waterfall. Even the heartbeat of the guard, standing 10 feet away, thudded in her ears like a war drum. Thump, 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 thump. She stumbled, pressing her hands to her ears. What followed was a wave of nausea. The smells were worse than the sounds. Unwashed fur, roasting meat, wet earth. It was a chaotic assault on senses she didn't know how to control. Her vampire hearing was sharp, but her new wolf instincts were wild, untamed. Steady. A large, warm hand settled on the small of her back. Jackson. She felt it, etched in fire. The bond hummed at his touch. It was magic. His touch was an anchor, grounding her in the storm. She leaned into him, breathing in his scent, rain and cedar, which was the only thing that didn't make her head spin. "The pack is curious," Jackson murmured, his chest rumbling against her shoulder. "They want to see the female I saved." Livia looked up. In fact, she wanted to hide. Dozens of wolves, some in human form, some shifting, stopped what they were doing to stare. Their eyes were yellow, green, and gold, judging, sniffing. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't shake the feeling of dread. They didn't smell a guest. They smelled a liar. Soon after, Jackson led her to a clearing at the edge of the village. It was a circle of packed earth, surrounded by tall pines. A training ring. "You need to learn to defend yourself," he said, stepping away from her. The loss of his touch made her cold again. "If you are going to stay, you cannot be prey." He tossed her a wooden staff. Livia caught it. Her reflexes were fast, too fast. The wood smacked into her palm with a stinging crack. "Attack me!" he ordered, spreading his arms. Livia hesitated. "I can't." "Try." Without warning, he lunged. It was a test. He moved with the blurring speed of an alpha, a speed that would have terrified a human. In that moment, the world slowed down for Livia. She saw the shift of his weight. She saw the muscle twitch in his shoulder. Her instincts surged. She didn't just dodge. She ducked under his massive arm, spun, and shoved him in the chest. It should have been a gentle push. Instead, power surged through her, vampire strength fueled by wolf adrenaline. Boom! Jackson flew backward. He didn't just stumble, he was launched through the air, crashing into a stack of hay bales 10 feet away. Dust exploded. As the echo faded, the entire clearing went dead still. Livia stared at her hands. They were shaking. She had just thrown a 300-pound alpha like he was a rag doll. That wasn't human. That wasn't even normal wolf strength. That was something else. Jackson sat up, brushing straw from his hair. He wasn't angry. He looked stunned and hungry. When her name left his lips, the air between them crackled with a tension that was half violence, half desire. "Who taught you to fight?" he asked softly, standing up. "No one," she stammered, backing away. I just panicked." Even so, she saw the suspicion in the eyes of the other wolves watching from the tree line. An old man with gray braids narrowed his eyes, sniffing the air. He smelled the anomaly. Before either could speak, a horn blew. "Arrow!" The hunting party was back. What's worse, they brought the kill. 4 wolves dragged a massive elk into the center of the village. The animal had been taken down moments ago. It was torn open. Suddenly, the scent hit her. Blood. Hot, metallic, sweet, crimson blood. It didn't smell like food. It smelled like need. Livia's vision tunneled. Her gums ached as her fangs, her vampire fangs, tried to descend. At the same time, her stomach cramped with a feral, carnivorous growl. The vampire wanted to drink. The wolf wanted to tear. Her chest ached with the effort to hold it back. She clamped a hand over her mouth, gagging. "Livia?" Jackson took a step toward her. She didn't know what scared her more, the look of concern on his face, or the fact that she wanted to bite his throat just to taste the life pulsing there. Without another word, she turned and ran. She bolted toward the tree line, her speed unnatural, a blur of motion that left the leaves spinning in her wake. She had to get away. She had to hide the monster before it ate the man she was starting to love. Moments later, she heard it, the heavy, rhythmic thud of paws hitting the earth behind her. Jackson was hunting her. She didn't fight it, running deeper into the dark woods, knowing that tonight, the secrets she kept might finally be the death of her. The forest was a blur of shadows and silver moonlight. Livia didn't stop running until her lungs burned and the village was miles behind her. She collapsed against the rough bark of an ancient pine, sliding down to the mossy earth. Her chest heaved, thump, 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 thump. The hunger was still there, a dull ache in her gums, but the panic was worse. She had almost shifted. She had almost bitten him. She didn't know what scared her more, the monster inside her or the man she was running from. She was a ticking bomb wrapped in a girl's skin. Snap. A twig broke nearby. Livia froze. She didn't need to look up to know he was there. The air suddenly tasted like rain and ozone. "You run fast!" a voice rumbled from the darkness. Jackson stepped out from behind a veil of ferns. He hadn't shifted, but his eyes were glowing that molten gold, and his chest was bare, slick with sweat from the chase. He didn't look angry. He looked compelled. "Go away," Livia choked out, pulling her knees to her chest. "I'm dangerous, Jackson. You saw what I did." "I saw a female protecting herself," he said, taking a step closer. "I saw a monster," she whispered. Silently, he crossed the distance between them. He didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees in the dirt, ignoring the mud, and trapped her between his massive arms. Under the weight of his stare, the hunger in her belly changed. It wasn't a hunger for blood anymore. It was a hunger for him. "Look at me," he commanded, his voice rough with emotion. He reached out, his thumb brushing the tear track on her cheek. "I don't care where you came from, Livia. I don't care who hurt you before. You are here now. You are Pack." "I'm not," she cried, her voice trembling. "If you knew what I really was—" "I know enough," he interrupted. He leaned in, his forehead resting against hers. "My blood is in your veins. That makes you mine." The space between them burned. His scent filled her nose, drowning out the smell of the forest, drowning out the memory of the blood. Her wolf pressed forward. She leaned into him, her hands clutching his shoulders. His skin was fever hot, with his scent in the air. She felt his heart beating against her own. It was a rhythm that promised safety. For the first time in her life, the silence inside her wasn't lonely. It was full of him. He tilted her head back. His gaze dropped to her lips. The world slowed. He was going to kiss her. The alpha of the wolves was going to kiss the daughter of the vampire king. It was treason. It was madness. Before the words left her lips, he claimed her. His mouth brushed hers, soft, testing, then demanding. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claiming. He tasted like wild mint and dominance. Livia gasped, opening to him, and the kiss deepened into something desperate. Just as the tension peaked, a sound tore through the night. Aroo! It wasn't the triumphant howl of a hunt. It was a ragged, gurgling scream of pain. Jackson pulled back instantly, his head snapping toward the north. The gold in his eyes flared brighter, the man vanishing behind the wolf. "Stay here," he growled. Before she could react, he was gone, vanishing into the trees with terrifying speed. Livia sat there for a heartbeat, her lips still tingling. Then the fear returned. That howl. It sounded like death. Without thinking, she scrambled up and followed him. She wasn't as fast as the alpha, but she was faster than any human. She wove through the trees, guided by the scent of distress. She burst into a small clearing a mile away. Jackson was there, kneeling beside a body. It was the old wolf, the one with the gray braids who had looked at her with suspicion earlier. He was lying in a pool of black blood. His chest had been torn open, but not by claws, by a blade. Livia stopped, her hand flying to her mouth. As the echo faded, Jackson stood up. He held something in his hand, a piece of paper nailed to the wolf's chest with a silver dagger. He turned to look at her. His expression was no longer the lover. It was the alpha. Cold. Deadly. "What is it?" Livia whispered, though she already felt the ice creeping into her veins. Jackson crumpled the paper in his fist. "A message." He opened his hand. The paper was stamped with a seal Livia knew better than her own face. A bat with spread wings. Her world tilted. "It says," Jackson's voice was a low snarl, "Return my daughter, or I will burn your forest to ash." He looked at her, really looked at her. In the stillness, the lie fell apart. He looked at the seal, then at her pale skin, her violet eyes. The pieces clicked into place. As the truth unraveled, Livia took a step back. He knew. To make things worse, the war she had run from had just found her, and it had brought her father's army to the wolves' front door. The silence in the clearing was heavier than stone. Livia stared at the crumpled note in Jackson's fist. "Return my daughter." The words hung in the air between them, sharp and poisonous. Jackson didn't scream. He didn't rage. He just looked at her, his golden eyes dimming with a betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. "You," he whispered. It was a statement, not a question. Before she could speak, the forest exploded. Crack! A branch snapped loudly right behind Livia. In the span of a breath, shadows peeled away from the trees. Not wolves. Things. Pale, hissing creatures with eyes like spilled ink. Vampires. Her father's elite guard. They weren't here to talk. They were here to take. One of them, a creature with jagged scars across his face, lunged. Not at Livia, but at a young wolf, a pup who had followed Jackson into the woods. "No!" Livia screamed. Her instincts surged. She didn't think about hiding anymore. She didn't think about the lie. As if summoned, she launched herself across the clearing. She moved faster than a wolf. She moved like a blur of moonlight. She tackled the vampire in mid-air. Crunch! They hit the ground rolling. The vampire snarled, flashing fangs at her. "Traitor!" he hissed. In that moment, Livia felt the beast inside her wake up. It wasn't just the cold vampire thirst. It was hot, wolfish rage. She didn't use a weapon. She swiped her hand. Her fingernails elongated, turning into razor-sharp claws. Wolf claws on a vampire hand. She slashed his throat. Black blood sprayed the leaves. She stood up, panting, her eyes flashing violet and gold. A true hybrid. While the forest held its breath, she realized the fighting had stopped. The other vampires had vanished back into the shadows, testing the defenses. But the wolves were still there. Jackson stood 10 feet away. The pup was safe behind him. But Jackson wasn't looking at the dead vampire. He was looking at Livia. He was looking at the claws slowly retracting into her fingers. The air thickened with the scent of fear. Not hers. Theirs. The pack members who had arrived as backup circled her. Their lips curled back. Low growls started in their throats. They didn't see the girl who helped cook stew. They saw the enemy. "Abomination!" An elder spat, stepping forward. "Kill it!" Before she could move, 3 wolves crouched, ready to spring. Livia closed her eyes. She wouldn't fight them. She deserved this. However, a massive shadow blocked the moon. Jackson stepped between her and the pack. He didn't shift. He just stood there, his chest heaving, his back to Livia. He faced his own people. "Stand down," he ordered. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a mountain. "She is a leech," the elder shouted. "She is the king's spawn." "She saved the pup," Jackson growled, "and she carries my blood." The moment froze. The pack hesitated. To kill a blood-bonded mate was a crime against nature, even if the mate was a monster. Jackson turned to look at her over his shoulder. His jaw was tight. He was furious. He was hurt. But the bond, the invisible fire tying them together, was pulsing stronger than ever. "Get up," he told her roughly. With every step he took back toward the village, the wolves parted, lowering their heads in reluctant submission. Livia followed him, her legs shaking. She was alive. Even so, as they walked back into the settlement, she felt the change. The warmth of the pack was gone. Mothers pulled their children away from her. Warriors gripped their spears tighter. She was an outcast in the only home she had ever known. By the time they reached the center of the village, the reality of their situation hit them. A horn blew from the watchtower. A long, mournful sound. Jackson looked up at the ridge surrounding the valley. Torches. Hundreds of them. They flickered to life along the tree line, forming a ring of fire around the wolf territory. What's worse, a cold, heavy pressure settled over the valley. Magic. A barrier. Livia recognized the taste of it on her tongue. It was her father's sorcery. "We are trapped," Jackson said, his voice void of hope. Her heart skipped. This wasn't a siege. It was an extermination. In the echo of his voice, a whisper sounded in her head. Cold, slippery, evil. "Come to me, Livia, or watch them all burn." She grabbed Jackson's arm. "He's here," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "My father is here." As the shadows danced between them, Jackson looked at the ring of fire, then at her. He didn't pull away this time. He gripped her hand. Hard. "Then let him come," Jackson said. "We don't run anymore." So, the trap snapped shut, and Livia realized with a sinking heart that the only way to save the man she loved might be to become the monster he hated. The air tasted like ash. Livia stood in the center of the village, coughing as thick, black smoke swirled around her. As the sky darkened, the ring of fire on the ridges grew brighter, squeezing the valley in a chokehold. It wasn't just fire. It was sickness. The magic her father had unleashed was heavy, pressing down on the wolves like a physical weight. Because of that, the warriors couldn't shift. She saw grown men falling to their knees, their bones cracking as they tried to force the change. But the magic held the wolf spirits down. To make things worse, the enemy knew it. Abruptly, the perimeter broke. Vampires didn't march. They swarmed. They poured over the barricades like a tide of black water, silent and deadly. "Hold the line!" Jackson roared. He stood at the front, swinging a heavy iron axe because his claws wouldn't come out. He was covered in sweat and blood, his golden eyes dimming under the pressure of the spell. Her chest ached. He was mortal right now. They all were. Before she could take a step, a scream pierced the air. A young mother was dragged into the shadows. Livia took a step forward, her hands trembling. She wanted to help. She wanted to fight. Yet she knew the truth. She wasn't the hero here. She was the bait. As if pulled by a string, her gaze snapped to the northern ridge. A figure stood there, silhouetted against the flames. Tall, regal, cold, King Valerian. He raised a hand. Without warning, 3 vampire generals blurred past the wolf defenses. They weren't aiming for the pack. They were aiming for the alpha. "Jackson!" Livia screamed. He turned. He saw them. He raised his axe. Instead, he stumbled. The magic flared, bringing him to one knee. The first vampire struck, a blade across Jackson's ribs. The second struck, a kick to his chest that shattered bone. The third disarmed him, sending the axe flying. Jackson hit the mud. He tried to rise, growling, spitting blood. Despite that, the generals were too fast. They pinned him down, a sword tip resting against his throat. In that moment, Livia's world shattered. She couldn't decide which was more terrifying, the look of defeat in Jackson's eyes, or the absolute silence that fell over the battlefield. "Enough," a voice echoed. It wasn't loud, but it carried over the fire. Valerian walked into the village. The wolves parted, too weak to stop him. He stopped 10 feet from Livia. He didn't look at the carnage. He looked only at her. "Look at what you have done, little bird," he said smoothly. "All this death, all because you refused to come home." Livia looked at Jackson. He was struggling against the blades, mouthing the word no. The reality settled in her bones. If she stayed, they all died. If she fought, Jackson died first. Consequently, she made the choice that broke her heart. She stepped forward. "Let him go," she whispered. Her voice trembled, but her chin was high. Valerian smiled. It was a cold, sharp thing. "Come to me, and the wolves live." "Livia, don't!" Jackson choked out, blood bubbling past his lips. "Don't do it!" She turned her back on him. She couldn't look at him. If she looked at him, she would stay, and he would die. "I am not yours," she said to Jackson, the lie tasting like poison on her tongue. "I never was." As the dust settled, she saw the light die in Jackson's eyes. Not the life, the hope. She walked toward her father. Moments later, rough hands grabbed her. Cold chains, spell-forged iron, snapped onto her wrists. The metal burned her skin, suppressing her wolf side, locking the hybrid away. She was just a vampire again, just a prisoner. As the wind shifted, carrying the scent of burnt pine and wolf blood, Valerian led her toward his carriage, a black, windowless box that looked like a coffin on wheels. She paused at the door, glancing back one last time. Jackson was still on the ground, watching her. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked broken. She didn't fight it. She stepped into the dark carriage. The heavy door slammed shut. Boom! In the stillness, the carriage began to move, rolling away from the only light she had ever known. She sat in the darkness, wrapping her arms around her knees. She had saved him. Truth be told, as the tears finally fell, she realized she had saved his life, but she had surely destroyed his soul. Darkness. It was absolute. Livia sat on the floor of the swaying carriage, the iron chains biting into her wrists. As the darkness pressed in, she listened to the rhythmic thud of the horse's hooves. Each step took her further away from Jackson, further away from the light. She closed her eyes, trying to picture his face, but all she could see was the betrayal in his eyes when she walked away. The knowledge was a heavy weight. She had broken him to save him. In a flash, the carriage lurched to a halt. The door swung open. King Valerian stepped inside. The space was too small for his ego. He loomed over her, bringing the scent of old blood and cold earth with him. He didn't look angry. He looked like a spider inspecting a trapped fly. "You thought you could run," he whispered, his voice smooth like velvet over gravel. "You thought a dog could protect you from a king." Livia didn't answer because she had no words left. "You have tainted the bloodline," he hissed. He grabbed her chin, forcing her to look up. "Let's see if there is anything pure left to salvage." Before she could blink, he struck. He didn't use a weapon. He sank his fangs into the junction of her neck and shoulder. Livia braced herself for the pain. She braced herself for the draining. Just as the pain peaked, a scream tore through the night. It wasn't hers. Valerian recoiled, throwing himself back against the carriage wall. He was gagging, spitting, clawing at his mouth. Smoke, actual gray smoke, curled from his lips. "Poison!" he shrieked. "What have you done?" Livia touched her neck. Her blood, it wasn't just red anymore. It shimmered with a faint golden heat. The Alpha's blood. The bond. All at once, realization hit her like a lightning bolt. She wasn't just a half-breed. She was a living weapon. Her blood, mixed with Jackson's, wasn't just forbidden. It was holy water to the vampire. It was acid. Her soul answered with a surge of power. "I am not your daughter," she said, her voice trembling not with fear, but with rage. "And I am not his pet." She stood up. The chains rattled. As the mark tingled, she reached for the beast inside her. Usually the iron chains suppressed the wolf. Yet her blood was burning so hot now that the magic on the metal began to sizzle. "Let me out," the wolf growled in her mind. "Let us hunt." She unleashed it. She didn't shift into a wolf. She shifted into everything. Her muscles swelled, her canines extended, but she kept her hands. She kept her mind. With a violent jerk, she pulled her arms apart. Snap! The iron links shattered like glass. Valerian stared at her, his eyes wide with genuine terror. He scrambled for the door, but he was too slow. Livia kicked the heavy oak door. It flew off its hinges, smashing into the mud outside. Without a sound, she leaped out into the night. She landed in a crouch. The vampire guards surrounding the carriage drew their swords, hissing. They looked at her, then at the smoking king, and hesitated. Because of that hesitation, they died. Livia moved. She was a blur of violet eyes and razor claws. She didn't fight them. She dismantled them. The moment froze as she realized how easy it was. She had the strength of the pack and the speed of the coven. She left them broken in the dirt. She turned south, toward the valley, toward the smoke rising in the distance. Her heart skipped. The battle wasn't over. She could feel Jackson's pain through the bond, a dull, throbbing ache. He was alive, but barely. Silently, she ran. She ran faster than she had ever run in her life. The wind whipped her hair back, tearing tears from her eyes. By the time she reached the ridge overlooking the settlement, the scene below was a nightmare. The wolves were losing. The vampires were closing in on the final lodge. She saw Jackson. He was back on his feet, swaying, holding a broken spear. He was fighting alone against 3 generals. He was going to die. Something inside her shifted. Livia threw her head back. She didn't scream. She didn't shout. She howled. Aroo! It wasn't a normal howl. It was amplified by vampire magic, booming like thunder, shaking the very trees. It was the sound of a queen claiming her territory. The silence roared. Every head on the battlefield turned. Vampire, wolf, king. Livia stood on the cliff edge, the moon framing her silhouette. Her eyes glowed violet gold. After the crash of her voice faded, she jumped. She fell hundreds of feet, landing in the center of the battlefield with a shockwave that knocked the nearest vampires off their feet. She stood up slowly, dusting the dirt from her hands. She stood between Jackson and the army. Thus, the final game began. She looked at her father, who was limping toward the front lines, and smiled. A smile full of teeth. "Get off my land," she said. The air crackled. It wasn't just the fire anymore. It was her. Livia stood her ground, the mud slick beneath her boots, staring into the face of the man who had created her only to cage her. King Valerian drew his sword. The blade was black steel, humming with dark magic. "You are a mistake," he sneered, his lip curling back to reveal fangs dripping with venom. "And mistakes must be erased." Before the words left his lips, he moved. He was fast, a blur of shadow. But Livia was something else. As if fate demanded it, she didn't dodge. She caught his wrist. Crack. The sound of his bone snapping was louder than the fire. Valerian screamed, a high, thin sound of disbelief. He dropped the sword. Between one breath and the next, Livia twisted his arm, spinning him around and kicking the back of his knees. The king of vampires hit the dirt. Hard. She stood over him, her chest heaving, her claws fully extended. "Kill her!" Valerian screeched to his army. "Kill the abomination!" The vampire generals hesitated. Then they surged forward. Hundreds of them, a black wave of death crashing toward her. Livia didn't flinch. She felt the power rising in her throat. Not the scream of a victim, but the roar of a predator. With every heartbeat, the pressure built until the alpha voice exploded from her chest. "Kneel!" The word hit the air like a physical blow. It carried the psychic weight of a vampire queen and the dominance of a wolf alpha. The tension broke instantly. The front line of vampires didn't just stop. They collapsed. Their knees hit the mud. Their heads bowed. Their biology forced them to submit to the apex predator. In the stillness that followed, Livia looked around. The entire army was on the ground. She looked down at her father. He was trembling, looking up at her with pure, unadulterated terror. He wasn't looking at a daughter. He was looking at a goddess. "Go," she whispered. The command was soft, but it echoed like thunder. "Take your shadows and leave my forest. If you return, I will not be merciful." Valerian scrambled back, clutching his broken arm. He didn't argue. He fled. As a result, his army, released from her command, flowed backward into the night like a receding tide. As the wind shifted, the fire on the ridges flickered and died. The magic barrier dissolved. Livia stood alone in the center of the clearing. Her claws retracted. The violet glow in her eyes faded to a soft, exhausted amber. She turned. Jackson was there. He was battered, bleeding, leaning heavily on a wooden post. But he was standing, and he was looking at her. Her breath caught. She expected fear. She expected him to see the monster that had just brought an army to its knees. Instead, he let out a breath, a ragged, broken sound. "Livia!" Without thinking, she ran to him. She collided with his chest, burying her face in the crook of his neck. He hissed in pain, but wrapped his arms around her so tight she could barely breathe. "You came back," he rasped, burying his face in her hair. "You left, and you came back." "I had to save you," she sobbed into his skin. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I lied." He pulled back, cupping her face in his large, rough hands. His thumbs wiped away the tears and the dirt. "You didn't lie," he said fiercely. "You are the enemy's daughter, and you are the Alpha's mate. You are the bridge, Livia. You are the cure." When her name left his lips, the war inside her finally ended. The vampire and the wolf stopped fighting. They settled. They merged. As the connection hummed, warm and steady, the surviving wolves began to step forward from the shadows. They didn't growl. They didn't raise their spears. One by one, they bowed. Not to Jackson, to her. She realized then that she never wanted a crown. She never wanted power. She just wanted a home. A beat later, Jackson kissed her. It was a kiss of blood and ash and promise. It tasted like forever. At last, the sun rose over the valley. It touched the scorched earth, and it touched the two figures standing in the center of it all. The monster was gone. The victim was dead. The queen had risen. She surrendered to the peace, closing her eyes and finally, feeling the warmth of the day.